Now, lobby group Afriforum has filed an urgent legal bid against interim COVID-19 regulations. It's all gotten a bit grey in the past few weeks, hasn't it? The Health Department gazetting the temporary rules after extending the period for public comment on changes to the National Health Act. Remember, of course, that we're no longer under a state of disaster. The interim regulations keep indoor mask mandates, restrictions on gatherings and requirements for international visitors in effect. It's also part of our viewer question. This morning we asked you to go and vote on our website enca.com about this very topic. The organisation, Afriforum's campaign manager, Jacques Broodryk, joining us now. Jacques, good morning to you. Thanks for staying on the line while we were down at the mining in Durban. We'll talk legalities in a moment, but I think what a lot of people are agreeing with as far as Afriforum is concerned, and I quote, is this is a constant encroachment on personal freedoms, isn't it?
Good morning, Gareth. Good morning to your viewers. Yes, I would absolutely agree with you. It is a constant encroachment. We've had this encroachment carrying on for 2 years now, and now government has decided to permanently gazette it. Now, I know that it's often reported in the media that these are temporary measurements or interim measurements, as you also refer to them, and government also often refers to them as that. But if you look at it from a legal perspective, these are gazetted as permanent regulations at the moment. So whether they call them interim or not is kind of irrelevant, because this is already part of permanent regulations that's been gazetted.
And the argument as well is that these regulations, interim, temporary, quite right, whatever word we want to use, it's still in the end it seems to be inconsistent with the Constitution and thus invalid. And that's the gist of your legal argument, isn't it?
That is certainly part of it. There has been one positive movement in this direction, and that is if you look at the gazetted regulations the regulations that were published for public comment initially, those included insane regulations. People government would have been able to force people into quarantine camps against their will. They would have been able to subject them to medical treatment against their will. So those are some really ludicrous regulations that they've dropped now. But even the ones that we've got at the moment is an infringement. And I think the whole point of the matter, Gareth, is that it's unnecessary. We see countries around the world busy deregulating, dropping mask mandates, yet now the South African government wants to permanently enshrine it into law, and it just doesn't make sense at all.
And why do you think this is the case? Why do you think government is doing it? Because it does leave the sole authority, Jacques, if my understanding is correct, of these regulations, these interim regulations, if we will, essentially with one person, that being the Minister of Health, Joe Putler. He gets to decide how, what, who, when and why.
Yeah, Gareth, that is absolutely correct. The Minister of Health is the one who will be calling all the shots now in terms of how long these regulations will be implemented for, when they will be implemented and when not. And I think that's a very dangerous precedent we're setting here, especially if you bear in mind that we've seen more than one member of the government's own Coronavirus Command Council come out and say, listen, we are medical and scientific professionals, but government is simply ignoring our advice and doing what they want to. Now you've vested all that power in the hands of one person, so he doesn't even need to take anyone's advice into consideration. And an example that I also like to use is people might say, well, you know, Dr. Pachla is a medical doctor, he's a professional. That might be true, but we also know that how much the ANC government loves to reshuffle the cabinet. So who knows, tomorrow we might have someone like Fikile Mbalula in the position of Minister of Health, and do you really want to trust him with making these type of decisions? So I think it's irregular, and it's very, very irresponsible of government to gazette these regulations, first of all, and secondly, to gazette them in the position that they have.
Why do you think government is insisting on keeping them in place? What would the play be if we're talking about political plays?
I would sincerely be speculating, and I would rather not get into the murky waters of speculation, because then you open yourself up for conspiracies and all kinds of theories. But from what we've seen from government for the last 2 years, everything they've done has been about maintaining power, expanding their power, and then obviously abusing those powers. Sneaking in all kinds of dirty contracts and making millions while the rest of the economy was shut down and people weren't allowed to work. So that would be my logical conclusion, that it's a power game and that someone's benefiting from it somehow. How exactly, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Well, I appreciate your time in speaking to us this morning. It's part of our viewer question as well, but we wanted to speak to Afriforum's campaign manager, Mr. Jacques Broodryk, joining us. You have just under half an hour to go and cast your votes on that very question.